Welcome to 10 Days for ARZA. I'm Deborah Palmer. Lately we've been reading about the internal controversy of law of return. In other words, who is a Jew in Israel? And here to talk about that today is Youdovin, Rabbi Youdovin, who is the executive director of ARZA, Association of Reform Zionists of America, which in Hebrew also stands for To the Land of Israel. Welcome, Ira.
Good to be here, Debbie.
Well, thank you. First, I'd like to know why the Reform Judaism's concern over the law of return.
Well, it's not only Reform Judaism, it's the conservative movement as well. In fact, some Orthodox Jews and many Jews who aren't involved in any form of synagogue life are also concerned. We believe that Israel, the Jewish state, the state of Israel, is a homeland for all Jews, not just a segment of it. Now, Jews who choose to live outside of Israel, who are not Israeli citizens or citizens of this community, for instance, also have a stake. Israel is unique.
You may want to define for people watching, how does the law of return as it stands right now? How's it defined right now?
The law of return defines who is regarded as a Jew by the state of Israel. As I was saying, all Jews have a stake in Israel. What the Orthodox in Israel would want to do is to relegate all but Orthodox Judaism to a second-class status. The immediate issue is one of who is a legitimate convert to Judaism. Under the Orthodox definition, a convert who is accepted by a Reform or conservative rabbi is not really a convert to Judaism, not a fully convert, not because of anything negative toward the individual, but the rabbi, the Reform or conservative rabbi who has performed the conversion is not his, or in the case of Reform Judaism sometimes now, her authority is not recognized by the Orthodox.
And this is according to halakha, as they call it.
Right. The Orthodox require circumcision and ritual immersion in a bathhouse that's called a mikveh. Now, it's not really what is done, because the conservative movement requires circumcision and immersion. Their conversions are rejected by the Orthodox as well. It's a matter of who does it. The Orthodox want to maintain a monopoly on religious life in the state of Israel, and that threatens to alienate more than two-thirds of the Jewish people who are not Orthodox.
Well, what can ARZA do about this? It's not only law of return. You had mentioned marriage and funerals, too.
The Orthodox, over the years, have developed a monopoly on matters of Jewish personal status, Jewish religious life in the state of Israel.
Well, how do they become the authoritative figure?
Well, in part, it's our own fault. They were there and we weren't. And I say this with a great deal of admiration and credit to them. The Orthodox were represented at the first Zionist Congress, which was called by Theodor Herzl. They've been involved in the process for many, many years. They were the only game in town for many, many years in Palestine, where you were either Orthodox, maybe 10 or 15% of the community, or totally secular. Meanwhile, the Reform movement was going through our particular insanity at the early part of the century of fearing double loyalties, and this was we were all new Americans. We were wondering what everybody else would say if somehow we had a commitment to a national entity other than the United States. So we remained aloof. We were anti-Zionist, or there were some Zionists within the Reform movement, but not in an organized way. And simply the Orthodox came in and established a hegemony and a monopoly that exists today. They enforce it through political processes. The Orthodox have their own political parties. We don't have anything like this in
Do you think you'll ever become a political party?
I hope not, because we believe in a separation of state and religion. That's why ARZA comes in. The Orthodox enforce their monopoly by going into coalition with whichever is the plurality party after each election. There's a right-wing, Likud, which now is the government, and there's a left-wing, left-center, Labor, and a voting bloc of approximately 10% of the population.
How do they react to your presence?
Who,
to ARZA? These major organizations and major coalitions.
The political parties in the state of Israel. We don't deal with the political parties in the state of Israel. The Orthodox are part of the political system, and they will offer their 10 or 12 seats in the Knesset in coalition with either the left or the right in a Jack Sprat arrangement. They don't care about anything else other than religious rights and what is a labor Zionist. The seculars care about who does marriages. So that's the way they enforce it. Now, we're not going to get involved in that process because we are against the politicization of religion. If we were to form our own party and put together some good-looking candidates and some, attractive slogans and all those jingles that go on television, we would become part of the problem rather than a means to its solution. However, we feel that because the question of who is a Jew, talking about a definition of what is a Jew, the nature of the Jewish people, is something that is of critical importance to Jews throughout the world, not just the Jews in the state of Israel, then we, through ARZA, which is a member of the World Zionist Organization, which meets once every 4 years to discuss critical issues affecting Jewish life in Israel and throughout the world, we, by enlisting tens of thousands, hopefully 100,000 American Reform Jews in our organization, we hope to send a statement to the people and the government of Israel that we are totally loyal to the state, that we're totally committed to the state's security, that we're identifying as Zionists, but that we're concerned over the question of religious rights in Israel.
You may want to just add that ARZA was founded in 1977, right?
Right.
Now, why all this time? You had also mentioned before that the Reformed Jewish movement was rather aloof. Why this shift? Now you're pro-Zionist and really wanting to get involved. Why the shift?
Well, look, the wheel's been around for many thousands of years, and why wasn't it put on a motor car until the late 19th century? Things take time to develop. At the early part of the century, there was a healthy strain of anti-Zionism, or was an unhealthy strain, happened to be considerable, within the Reform movement. But the hallmark of Reform is flexibility and a capacity for adapting to the realities of life. So as early as World War I and immediately thereafter, within the Reform movement, there was a stirring around. We had a community of Jews building a Jewish community in Palestine. They were beset by the British, they were oppressed and attacked by the Arabs, so that although within the Reform movement there was still opposition to the creation of a Jewish national entity, Israel, there was philanthropy and political and moral, economic support for the community. The Holocaust wiped away the last traces of anti-Zionism. Why did it take from 1948 to 1977 to actually form a Zionist organization within the Reform movement?
That's the question I was...
we spend hours thinking about that, and the answer is that nobody, it never occurred to anybody because within the Reform movement, we had become thoroughly committed to and oriented toward the state of Israel through our own programs, through synagogue tours going off to Israel, through Israel programs for our youth, which are some of the best. It wasn't until 1977 that somebody was hit with a light bulb goes on. Hey, we've done all these Zionist things. It's about time to affiliate our movement with the World Zionist Organization. I was lucky enough to be around at the time.
Now, 1977, that was your first Congress. It was the 29th Congress.
Right. And
an interesting thing happened about the votes and the number of members. You may want to elaborate on that. More votes than members. How did that happen?
When that came out, one of my friends from Chicago said that Mayor Daley would be proud of you. We had 9,000 members. There happens to be almost 1 million members of Zionist organizations in the United States. Each organization puts up a slate of up to 152 names for the 152 American delegates to the Zionist Congress, and then based on how many people vote for your slate and so forth, that's the number of delegates you get to send. We had at least 2,000 people who are Reform Jews in Hadassah and the ZOA who voted for ARZA's slate rather than Hadassah's slate, even though they
Why? What were you saying that was different?
We were saying that a vote for ARZA was the American Jews' way of saying to the government of Israel, to the people of Israel that we believe and are committed to Jewish pluralism.
And at the same time bringing about unity.
And with the whole thing is, if we thought it was divisive, we wouldn't get into this. But when one part of the Jewish community, the Orthodox, and not all the Orthodox, just the politicized Orthodox in Israel, say that we reject and we deny under Israeli law equality for other forms of religious Judaism, this is divisive. And by the by, it's kind of curious. There's something a lot about the perverse nature of the Jewish people in some ways. The non-Jewish communities in Israel have total freedom and total equality, because the way the system was set up by the Ottoman Turks in the last century, which has continued to this day, each religious community has its own recognized leadership. So Catholics take care of Catholic affairs. Armenians take care of Armenian affairs. Muslims take care of Muslim affairs. But when it comes to the Jewish community, the Orthodox take care of everybody, all the affairs of the Jewish people. So we have kind of an interesting situation.
How is Reform Judaism, and soon we'll get into how you get your voice heard, how will Reform Judaism change the lives of those who are so used to secularism?
You mean in Israel?
In Israel.
The secularism within Israel, I think, is fading. I think that secularism isn't really the right. We use it. It's not the right word. We use it because we don't have a better word. For the founding generation, the pioneers, the Chalutzim who came and set up the kibbutzim, who broke the prairie, they came from Orthodox homes in Europe, and they rejected that because their grandparents and all the way back for 2,000 years had spent their whole lives praying for the coming of the Messiah to come and bring them to Palestine. And this founding generation rejected that. They could do it themselves. You can't wait for the Messiah anymore, and to spend an hour a day in the synagogue is a waste of time. You should be spending it planting or picking your crop, etc. So that's how it's secularism, but it's almost a religion of secularism. Now, for the new generation of native-born Israelis who are called Sabras, for whom the prairies have been mostly broken, and the state is not a dream to them. It's a place they're born. It's not a homeland to be built. It's a home. That ideology is no more.
Like along with Chalutzim and the pioneering.
Right. The pioneering of ideology of their grandparents is no more satisfying to them than the ideology of Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley and Dan O'Boone is to kids who are growing up in the inner cities today. They need their own. And I think among a large number of, quote, secular Israelis, the younger generation, there's a searching. They are trying to rediscover what grandma and grandpa back in the European ghetto knew and their parents forgot or wiped away. Now, you can't go back to European Orthodoxy. You have to find a religious expression that's indigenous to the state. And I think that Reform Judaism, not the American Reform Judaism we know here, because you don't need a service that's partially in English in Israel, will, as a process, maybe not out of whole cloth, but as a process, will satisfy these spiritual needs.
Have they been receptive to it? You've been working with them for years now. Have they been pretty receptive?
There is a great deal of interest. I would be lying to you if I said that our synagogues are being overrun, our Israeli synagogues are being overrun by hordes of people hungry for what we're going to be giving them.
It's a little ravenous. Okay.
But there is an interest, and wherever we're able to establish an office or a synagogue or have a rabbi who can teach and doesn't have to spend all of his time fighting the local Orthodox rabbinate for the right to do this, that, or the other thing, there is interest. There's interest in the Army, where we're able now to put some of our rabbis in as teachers, not as chaplains. They can't wear uniforms.
That's still, okay.
Because, that's it. And there's great interest in the kibbutz movement now. The kibbutz movement are the most secular of the secularists. But we've now gone and we're teaching in some kibbutzim, and we have our own kibbutz, which gave us legitimacy.
And that name?
Kibbutz Yahel, which means to spread light. The kibbutz movement said to us, in effect, look, we're interested in what you have to say to us, but it's got to be dialogue. It's very kibbutzy. You know, we have to talk to one another.
Kibbutzing in the kibbutz.
No, it's not kibbutzing. It's kibbutz. It's a very kibbutz sort of talking orientation. That look, if you want us to take you seriously, you have to take us seriously, and the only way you can take us seriously is to plant your roots into the soil of Israel as we have. Establish your own settlement. And we've done that, and we've done that under the worst possible conditions.
What have some of those conditions been?
It's not a place you'd want to live. Our
Why?
kids are on the Jordanian border. That is on the inside the Green Line, on the pre-1967 side of the Jordanian border, 75 kilometers north of Eilat. During the summer, it's 125 in the shade, but there's no shade. They're isolated, they're cut off, they're fighting the desert.
What keeps them there?
Commitment, a sense of building the land, securing the land. They're on the border. If you spend a night there and you see, I have half of the kibbutz are native-born Israelis, the other half are Americans who have made Aliyah for the purpose, including some kids whom I, as a youth director, taught their first words of Hebrew to, and I saw them in summer camp when they were 15 and 16.
And now that they're living there.
And you see these kids now doing night patrol. In camp, we used to send them on bush patrol to get people who were necking out of the bushes. Here, they're carrying M16s and patrolling the perimeters of the kibbutz against real terrorists, not people who are necking in the bushes. And you realize what's happened to these kids.
Okay, Ira, I want to get back to what you're doing in Israel to establish these reforms. But first, how do you do it? How do you get your voice across? Coming up in 1982, in the spring of '82, is the 30th Congress, World Zionist Congress. How are you going to get the delegates you want?
The Zionist Congress is a democratic institution. The size of each organization's membership determines the number of seats it has at the Congress. The number of seats you have at the Congress determines your influence in setting policy. ARZA is still a young organization. I'm getting older, it's still young. Our goal is 100,000 members. And during the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, next week or so, we have launched a major membership campaign in synagogues throughout the country to enlist the difference between our current membership, which is about 30,000, and the 100,000 members. With 100,000 members, we will make a significant statement.
So this is 10 days for ARZA. This is what we refer to as
right.
Okay, how are you going about getting them? Are you going all over the country, going to the synagogues, talking to the people directly?
Well, look, there's when you say we're part of the movement, so that the we is in every community, the local leadership. In some communities, ARZA has been added to the synagogue dues bill as an optional item. Nobody's forced to join. Everybody has to make a conscious decision, but it's there in front of you. In synagogues throughout the country on Rosh Hashanah, in some cases on Yom Kippur, the rabbi will preach a sermon about Israel. ARZA is not a one-issue organization. He's going to talk about the AWACS sale. He's going to talk about the autonomy negotiations. He's going to talk about the Iraqi nuclear rate, and he's going to talk about the internal situation in Israel. He's going to talk about ARZA, and then during the week, members of the congregation, not some service out there in McLean, Virginia, we hire people to make calls, but members of the congregation will make the call.
Those are all issues that ARZA addresses, right?
Sure.
Okay, continue.
Yeah.
For ARZA's sake. Okay.
So that we will sensitize the community to all of the things that are of concern to Israel, some of which are threats to Israel. One of them is the religious situation, which is not a threat of the magnitude of the AWACS, but it does threaten to pull apart the fiber of Israel and of Jewish life, and there is a practical response. An individual will receive a telephone call from a member of his congregation, his community, inviting him to join ARZA, or her to join ARZA, or them to join ARZA.
Have you heard any responses so far?
Yeah, we're very, very pleased. People want to. They know, all sorts of people say, why haven't you asked us before? It's your question, Debbie. What took you so long? You know, why didn't you call me 40 years ago?
Okay, let's say you get the 100,000, I hope you get them, and then you get 50 delegates. Now those 50 delegates, they will be the voice box of this 100,000. To the people who make up your membership, will they have a voice? Will they be able to express their opinions?
On the selection of the delegates?
No, and their attitudes towards views, towards issues.
Well,
like we have state representatives. Okay.
Okay, it's a good question. In terms of the question of Jewish pluralism, religious rights, there's no problem because our position is out in the open, and that's why people are joining ARZA. In terms of what position do we take on the AWACS, for instance, suppose the administration says, look, let us send the AWACS and we'll give Israel X number of F-15s or one of these training points. What input will the people who vote for ARZA have into that? Those kind of issues really don't come before the Zionist Congress. Those are issues for the Israeli government. Insofar as there are issues, territories, quality of life, ARZA has a board of 85 people who are democratically elected, who come from communities throughout the country. They're members of these communities, members of these congregations, they're rabbis and lay leaders. And they're very sensitive to what the folks back home in the grassroots are thinking, so that when an ARZA board member comes to a board meeting to discuss an issue and to vote on an issue, he or she has spoken to a large number of people in the local community. So
the members usually take really direct action, not direct action, but really furtive involvement in helping the decisions.
Well, in one situation, the question of territories, the Green Line, what the future of Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, ARZA wanted to discuss it and take a position on it. Now, I know in communities throughout the country, this was discussed in congregational meetings, at ARZA meetings, so the delegates came instructed on the vote. By the by, there we on the question of territories, we adopted kind of a very broad statement that we weren't going to draw maps, but a liberal religious viewpoint on the question of territories would include both the historical demands, or the demands of history on the Jewish people, and also the rights of the indigenous Arab population, because that is prophetic. The prophets were always concerned about the rights of the stranger and the alien, without drawing boundaries, without prejudging negotiations on autonomy, but that both elements should be included, which I don't think Gush Emanim, which is an Orthodox religiously based organization, they're just interested in the mandates of what we learned from the Bible. The Bible becomes a great cartography book, drawing maps in this age. We can't live with that.
Speaking of cartography and geography, ARZA issues are not only restricted or limited to the United States. This has spread all over the world, hasn't it? You started other organizations.
Yeah, not ARZA, the ARZA chapters. Yeah.
Right.
Look, Reform Judaism is international and not only an American movement, and wherever there is a Reform Jewish community, we're beginning to clone ARZA. We have an ARZA clone in Canada, Kadima, in South Africa, in England, in Holland, in Australia.
And you're all working together for the reform.
We all are. Wherever you find Jewish life, you find structure and organization and too many acronyms and too many titles. We're all bound together in an international organization called Artsenu, which means our land or something like that. And if we ever establish Jews on Mars or Venus or Saturn, we'll get Marzenu. Very good. You want to go to work for us?
I want to go. I had interrupted you before. What are some of the other things that the rigid regulations that keep Reform Jews from doing certain things? We were talking about marriages, and you had told me about some marriage on a kibbutz.
Yeah. The way it works, and I'll try to talk in headlines because you can talk for hours about this. The way it works is that in Israel, rabbis who are licensed to perform weddings receive their authority from the chief rabbinate. We have a similar system here in the United States, and not anybody can perform a marriage in a state. He's got to sign a book, but because of First Amendment guarantees, almost anybody can receive the authority. Now, in Israel, the rabbis who are licensed are always Orthodox rabbis. We can't understand why, but that's the way it works out. Now,
what do Reformed people do?
Now, the question is, to answer your first question, then we'll get around to the second one. The question is coming up with a test case. To get a bride and a groom who will stand up in front of a rabbi, a Reform rabbi, who will do the ceremony, and the rabbi will take the contract, the license, bring it to City Hall to get it registered, and City Hall will say, we don't recognize your signature, and then everybody goes to court to challenge it. Now, and there's so many problems just living in the state of Israel. Economic problems, military problems, security problems. Who wants to take on the rabbinate? So what most Reform Jews have done, yeah, sure. I mean, look, we've got real anti-Semites. Why bother to kick around your rabbis? See, one of the reasons that Jews here in the United States sometimes take after their rabbis is because everything is so good in other ways. So Israel, you don't have that latitude. Most Reform Jews go through a sham. They go in the morning. Tuesday is the usual morning, because Tuesday is the third day of creation. For us, the Shabbat, Saturday is the seventh, and Tuesday is the only day on which God says, and it was good twice. So that's a good day to get married. So they go, in the morning they go to the Orthodox rabbinate and get married. And in the afternoon they go and they are married by a Reform rabbi, and that's the real religious, spiritual. But the piece of paper that goes to City Hall goes from the morning ceremony. Except when we got to Kibbutz Yahel, where you have idealists who are there to build a Reform life. So 2 kids, both of them Olim from the United States, were married by 5 Reform rabbis. 5, count them. I mean, the buses.
Real quick, because we're running out of time. Which one went through?
What happened? The Orthodox rabbi from Eilat, which is down the road, was there just as a witness. He didn't sign anything, but it was accepted. The chief rabbi of the state of Israel said it was Rabbi Hadiah, the Orthodox rabbi, who actually performed the ceremony.
Well, Ira, if there are other people like you representing ARZA, you should have at least 100 or 300 delegates at the next Congress. I hope it goes through.
I hope you're one of them.
This has been so enjoyable. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
And join us again. I wish you lots of luck.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Shalom.